Good afternoon. From one project to the next. It's a busy day here in the shop. But today we're going to begin the transformation of this bike. Today is the day where we start stripping parts off this thing and getting it ready to put new parts on, of course. I'm going to take the seat off today, the rear fender, probably the rear fender struts. I'm not sure if I'm taking the rear wheel off yet. We'll see how far we get. I know I need to drain the fuel, so I'm going to start there. But a question I have for you guys, if you guys follow me on my shorts feed, you'll see that I posted a question on there. My question to the audience is, turn signals. Now I have to say on these old bikes, I've never been a big fan of the turn signals. I definitely don't like the big light bar that hangs off the rear of this bike. I think it's ugly. If you have saddlebags, it makes sense and it fits well. This bike is not going to have saddlebags. I know that for a fact. I may even eliminate the rear crash bars. I'm not sure yet. Haven't quite decided that route yet. Well, my question is, do I take off this front light bar and run this with no turn signals on it at all? I do really like that clean look, and I feel that might be the best direction for this bike, but I want your guys' feedback. What do you guys think about that? What does the audience think? How do you guys feel? Now, if you think turn signals are the way to go and you want to see a bike done up like that, then I'll correct this light bar and we'll add something to the back. I do have a nice pair of fender struts that do have some bullet style, they're 50s style turn signals. They're more of a Cadillac style turn signal, and I think those would look nice. They'd integrate a little bit better. They wouldn't hang out as far as the big light bar that does. That's my preference. Anyway, for today, what we're going to do is we're going to get this air cleaner off, we're going to get the fuel line unhooked, we're going to go ahead and drain the gas out of the tanks, and then we're going to start taking parts off of this bike. Been pretty excited to get started on this project. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's keeping me up at night. Got quite a few parts gathered for it. And when it's done, this bike should look pretty good. Not that this bike looks bad already as it is. I know the paint scheme it's nice. A lot of people like it for sure. I've gotten a lot of good positive feedback on the paint colors on this bike. It's not my cup of tea, and it's not everybody's cup of tea. So I'm going to strip these off of here. I'm going to put on a different tin set completely. Of course, we're going to go with good old gloss black. I know that's not everybody's favorite either, but it seems to appeal to more people than not. And of course from there I've got new wheels and tires that are going to go on this bike, which I'm very excited to put on here. It's a set that I picked up not too long ago, and man are they cool. Well, that float bowl is leaking. See if we can catch that fuel. I'm not sure how much is going to leak out of here. Now that the fuel tank is draining, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the jack underneath this bike so I can actually stabilize it. That way, when I start tearing the rear end of this thing off, it's not going to sink to the ground, because I do want to remove these shocks today. I'm not going to take them completely off, but I'm going to take them off far enough to be able to remove this rear fender. That's the next step for me, is getting the seat off, fender struts, rear fender, and access to this rear wheel. That way, we're ready to put the new rear wheel on. When I bring them here, I'll mount up my brakes and my rotor and my sprocket and all the things I need, and I'll space it properly, because right now the spacing on this is not correct. It's the way the bike came, unfortunately, and it's a little bit too far right justified. So I want to get that spaced properly. So we're going to start with removing the seat after I get the jack underneath the bike. Now with the jack properly supporting the bike, I'm going to go ahead and remove the seat. seat definitely needs a good cleaning, so that's going to be one of the steps I'm going to take in revitalizing this machine here, is actually cleaning up this seat. I do like it. It's pretty comfortable. Doesn't look that bad on it. I don't have a better option for a seat, and I'm not going to buy one. The parts I'm using are parts that I have laying around. I didn't want to buy new things to fund this project. I do have enough sitting in the stable that I can actually utilize to make this bike something special. Now with the seat off, we're going to go ahead and attempt to remove this rear fender. I'm going to start at the fender hinge, and I'm going to start working my way forward. With the fender hinge being out of the way, I should be able to lift the hinge up and be able to get my wrench inside here for all the, it's got a lot of nuts that attach to the bolts on the inside, so I want to keep those from spinning freely. Sometimes on these old bikes, the nut on the back side is actually fixed to the fender, and sometimes they've been removed so many times that it's not fixed any longer. These seem to be fixed. They seem to be in good enough shape, and I'm hopeful that they are. And of course, like any old shovel head, it's great because none of the bolts are going to match. This side looks like 1/2 inch. This one's definitely 9/16. The other ones look like they're 1/2 inch. And I'm sure at some point in time we'll run into some good old metric parts. Of course, the nut on this side does spin freely, and it feels like that one's 9/16. So we're going to try to grab the right size wrench. Now with the hinge portion out of the way, I should be able to get to all these nuts and bolts. And this one is probably going to have to, I'm going to try to get it off probably from the inside, potentially, because it is going to spin freely. So not the right hardware pieces, unfortunately. And these are sometimes what makes these types of projects really difficult. Using improper hardware is never a good idea. I know what happens. I know sometimes we get in a pinch and we gotta, you gotta put something in there. You gotta make it work. Or sometimes there's no forethought into, well, eventually I'm gonna have to take this thing apart. So maybe I shouldn't use these nuts or bolts or what have you. I'm gonna have to get that off with the fender strut, I believe. That's unfortunate. And one way you can do this, it does work, is if you actually unbolt it from here you can take the whole entire fender assembly off with the struts attached. I just like having the struts in place so I can start removing all of the hardware. That way I can disassemble everything the way it was in individual pieces. It just makes my work easier rather than trying to hold the fender in place and take the nuts and bolts off and fight it. Where it's already on the bike, it just makes it easier to do if everything's already hung. But sometimes you run into these issues where you can't do anything about it. The head of this bolt is rounded right off, and unfortunately I'm gonna have to figure out how to get that thing out of there. Of course, I'm going to take as much of this apart as I possibly can. It's funny sometimes how many washers and spacers and things that are put on these to utilize hardware that you have. And I understand not having the proper hardware. But sometimes when you put longer bolts in, you run the risk of running it into the tire if when under load or you hit a bump or whatnot, you could hit the tire on these nuts and bolts on the inside, and of course risk ruining the tire. Not that the tire is the best shape, but when it was new, you don't really want to chance it. At least I don't. This one right here is probably ran into this tire numerous times because I can't fit my finger between the bolt itself and the tire, so that's scary. I do believe I have the proper hardware kit back at the house, so if I do, that'll make it nice. I'll be able to put the right hardware in this thing and clean it right up and make it look really good. It's a Colony Parts kit. They do make a kit for these rear fender struts for the long fender with the hinge here, and of course with the short fender, or for the short fender like the FX style. You can buy either of those. So now that I'm this far, I'm going to start backing some of this wiring out. That way I don't have to deal with that after the fact. This is a giant mess in here, of course, which it typically is. I'm not sure what they were doing. We'll go ahead and remove the taillight lens first. We'll get this license plate bracket out of the way. Of course, this was all put on with some goofy hardware too, which I believe I have the correct hardware with the new fender. I've got everything I need for that fender. I do have the turn signal bar, if that's the route that I end up going. I've got the license plate mount and the tail light, so I'll be using those parts. I still need to figure out what's going on with my brake lights. I'm assuming it's some sort of a wiring issue somewhere, something that's broken or lost. I chased some wires for a while and never really found a good answer, so I'll have to go through and figure out what exactly is going on and why. somebody put some sort of a rubber matting on this, and the top stud there is actually rusted right off. Actually, it's not even matting at all. Well, maybe it is. Some sort of a rubber. It's got like a duct tape on the back of it to hold it in place. Goofy. Like any good project, you wish it could talk. You wish it could tell you a story, where it's been, and you know, maybe why it got duct tape. There's tons of aftermarket zip ties on this thing, kind of just holding everything everywhere. Again, a bunch of goofy wiring in here, and I'll show you guys that in a minute. Concerning. That's exactly what I'm thinking right now, is this stuff is concerning. I mean, just weird tied off wires, taped up. Not exactly sure why somebody did it this way. Removing the ground that's on the taillight right now in an effort to be able to get to these studs here, which they should loosen up nice. There's a ton of dirt on these, and sometimes dirt helps this stuff to keep from rusting, and these parts really aren't rusty underneath, which I'm grateful for. Which means I should be able to remove them easy enough. On the underside of this, it looks like the wiring was tarred into place. There's some sort of a strange rubber hose around everything, and then it looks like it was tarred over in an effort to keep it waterproof. Definitely not a factory part. Not that I'm aware of. And I know they were doing weird stuff in the 70s, but I can't say I've ever seen tar on the underside of a bike like this. I'm not sure if this is going to come right out or if this is going to fight me. Again, like I said, it's full of tar. It's pretty neat. So what they did is someone took a tube, an inner tube, and they used a couple of them actually to seal this part here, and of course, like I said, they wrapped a hose around the wiring. Unfortunately, my camera battery died. They keep doing that. I think they're probably on their last legs, honestly. I've recharged them so many times and used them quite a bit, and they just don't seem to hold a charge, and they don't really tell you that they're going dead. I see on the screen they've got 100% charge all the time. The last battery, actually, when I turned the camera on, it was charging. Not sure how that works because it wasn't plugged in. Anyway, one of the neatest things I've ever seen, I'm sure if you guys can see that, that's a piece of hose, and obviously the back there is covered in inner tube. So there are two connections inside there, and I dropped one on the ground. They're the slide-on connections. One wire wasn't even crimped on there, so I'm assuming that's probably why I didn't have a brake light. I'm thinking that couldn't have worked because it wasn't crimped properly. So that probably is my brake light issue. Fingers crossed. I hope that's it. We're going to go back to feeding these wires out of here so we can get this fender to come off the rest of the way. As you can see, I have one clip here and nothing there, and that was cleaned off way too short as well, so I'm assuming that's probably also part of the issue with the wiring. And obviously this isn't factory wiring by any means, and this has had someone else's fingers in it, and that's kind of how these things go. You know, they're 45 years old. This bike's 45 years old. I mean, I can only imagine how many people have actually been in this motorcycle and how many things have been done. And we can tell that this is not a factory Harley paint scheme, so someone painted it at some point in time. I couldn't tell you when. And when they did that, they probably clipped the wires in an effort to take everything apart, and then instead of soldering everything back together the right way or using any kind of other hardware to attach this properly, they just kind of put it together poorly. Oh well, that happens. Now I have the wiring backed out of the way here. I'm going to go ahead and jack the bike up a little bit further, and I'm going to start removing the upper shock mounts so I can pull this whole rear section off of the bike. With the nut removed from this side, I like to keep the bolt in place on the other side, and I like to slowly take off one tank. The other side is, of course, hanging then on that front bolt, which usually works out pretty well. I haven't had a lot of issues with that. I know some people suggest that you don't do that. Obviously, there still is gas in here, so I am spilling fuel everywhere. But these are a nice set of original tanks. They're painted, you know, in a color I don't really like, but to each their own, right? We'll get this one off. We'll pull the other side off. This side's just as easy. I just hold that bolt in place. I pull this off, and it is leaking fuel too. So I'll have to clean up that mess. And there you have it, guys. I've got this thing partially stripped down. The nice thing about having it stripped down this far is I can go ahead and clean it now. I can get in here and start cleaning off some of these parts and getting things organized here and getting this thing ready for rebuild. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to spot clean all of these parts here, get this grime and looks like barn dust and whatever scrubbed off of here, and get this thing tidied up to where it looks good again. And then we'll start hanging parts on it. Well guys, thanks for following along again. Appreciate you guys sticking with me through the video. I know this was a bit of a long one, and I got quite a bit done. But man, am I excited to show you the transformation that's going to happen to this bike. Got some parts in line that are going to come here in the next few days, and we're going to start hanging those on there once we get this beast cleaned up. So I've got some cleaning ahead of me, I've got some work ahead of me, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that, and maybe I'll make a cleaning video so you guys can kind of see what I do to spruce some of this stuff up. As always, you know, I appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Of course, if your friends like these types of videos, share it on your social media platforms. Post it on Facebook, share it on YouTube, Twitter, wherever. That's fine. You know, I appreciate the shares. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. You know, my subscriptions continue to grow each week, and man, am I grateful for it. So, you know, I appreciate you guys that are, you know, tuning in and subscribed. And for the people that aren't, you know, do me that favor and hit that button so you can see these videos as they come out. Well guys, that's it for me today. This is where I'm stopping. I got a lot to clean up around here, get some gas off the floor, some tools put away, and my hands washed. So thanks for following along. We'll catch you next time.